And thanks so much for joining in with Fight Night Picks. You guys, the Fight Night Picks fans, you voted for it. Our thumbnail for the video, we went funky with it. And coming up this weekend, middleweight main event, you have Sean Strickland in his 5th 5-rounder with the UFC, taking on Abus Magomedov, the former PFL $1 million finalist, and he's in just his 2nd UFC fight. He knocked out Dustin Stoichkos in under a minute to make that UFC debut. After years away, so awesome stuff out of Magomedov in that fight. I mean, as always, one half Euros to do with Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram, at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, Matt Allen, FNP, respective socials. But we look at this fight, and you have a couple of primary strikers. And if you consider it for Strickland, we know the combinations. That 2-3's coming at you all day.
He's right there.
And he's going to pepper that jab in there. For Abus Magomedov, he's all over the map with the striking. But it is great. It's crisp. It's clean. And it's a lot of fun to watch at a UFD gym over in Germany. But Magomedov, one of those guys that you're trying to kind of pick the brain of some of the strikers that train at UFD. There have been a litany of them. Obviously, I think the highlight in recent memory didn't go well for him in one championship in the debut or the second fight, but Roberto Soldic. But if you look at it for a guy like Magomedov, set up the blueprint in one UFC fight, get yourself a main event. And we talked a lot about Abus Magomedov when he was making that debut against Stoichkos, to the fact where Matt ended up making himself a meme. Abus Magomedov to the UFC. And for Magomedov, his Keith Richards, start me up, I never stop. Well, his never stop stopping UFC tenure. Now that sounds like that Lonely Island movie that bombed. But for Magomedov, he was signed to the UFC back in August of 2021. I mean, for Abus Magomedov, he was booked against Gerald Meerschaert in December. He was booked against Aliaskhab Pesria back in March of this year. He was booked against Muradov, and now he ends up taking on Dustin Stoichkos. And UFC fans, MMA fans, Fight Night Picks fans, you might know Magomedov because he was a PFL finalist in their original season. He was put on a poster by Bilal Muhammad's teammate Lewis Taylor. In that fight, got knocked out by a left hook.
That's going to happen, though.
It's going to happen sometimes. But if you look at it for his season overall, he had 2 first-round finishes. He had a majority draw on the playoffs night, because you fight twice in one night. So majority draw in the 2-round fight. In the 3-round fight, he was able to get a unanimous decision win to move on. If you look at Abus Magomedov, he hasn't fought very often at all. His last fight was almost 2 years ago against Cezary Kezik over with KSW. And my God, did he look good in that fight. And he put Kezik to sleep with a front choke in that one. So pretty cool stuff from Magomedov. Before that, a big win over with EMC 3 years and 3 months ago. And you might go, hey, I remember that PFL season. Was that like 4 years ago? Yeah, it was. It was 2018. So for Magomedov, hasn't fought very often. You look at the last name and you look at that tweet that Aaron Bronstetter put out back in July that fighters with Magomedov in their name win like 84% of the time in the UFC. I like that. And I really like Abus Magomedov's style because you might look at his last name and go, well, this guy's a grappler. He won his last fight by submission. This guy's a striker, and it's like watching a K1 artist at the purest form strike in MMA. He really is a lot of fun from either stance. Looks like a Thai fighter. I really do like Magomedov's style, and I think he's a fun fighter. It's just, he hasn't fought in forever, and he doesn't fight very often.
I don't know if he's Rico Verhoeven.
I have no idea what we're going to get out of him this week.
With Abus Magomedov, I do really like his striking style. I think he can go to the legs against Dustin. I think he is going to be able to use his boxing very effectively against Stoichkos. And if Abus Magomedov just doesn't respect the striking power of Dustin Stoichkos, I think he is just going to be able to walk forward and walk forward and walk forward.
You made yourself a meme in the fact that you didn't know you're making yourself into a meme because you said that Magomedov could just throw caution to the wind, not respect Dustin Stoichkos, and knock him dead. And boy, did he ever with that front kick. Wow. So, Abus Magomedov's second coming of Anderson Silva. And now he gets this fight against Sean Strickland that was a head scratcher in his book because it's, 18 fights now for Sean Strickland in the UFC. And he's a 7th-ranked fighter against a guy in his second fight in Magomedov.
I think you'll agree with me on this, though. We might disagree on what the best division is in the UFC, right? You think it's
not middleweight.
I think it's lightweight. We both agree middleweight's probably the weakest of the divisions. If any unranked fighter is going to beat a ranked fighter who's pretty well known, it's probably going to be the middleweight division. Just because a lot of the fighters in that kind of 8 down, like the top 6 is kind of set. You have Robert Whittaker, you have Israel Adesanya, you have Marvin Vettori, Jared Cannonier. Sean Strickland is kind of in that category, but he has lost to a number of those guys at this point. I know he's beat a lot of those guys too, but that's the weird thing about Strickland. That's why I do love this matchup. You bring it up. You just know what his skill set is. There's no question marks with Sean Strickland. I don't think he's going to show up throwing spinning back kicks like Chris Weidman did against Luke Rockhold. Just the worst idea anybody's ever had. No, he's going to be what got him to the dance, and that is that in-your-face kind of boxer. And I do think that pressure is going to be important because Magomedov, when he struggles against anybody, is guys who will stay in his face and can eliminate some of those kicks. It's a story old as time. Fedor Emelianenko fought Mirko Cro Cop, and guess what Fedor did? He fought really close to him, and nobody knew why. But if you eliminate the kick of your opponent, you get really close to him, and you force him to become a boxer. And I do think Strickland can follow a similar game plan, but Magomedov on the outside is a very effective kicker, and I do think it's weird. We say this about most of the guys Strickland fights. If they only kick his leg more, think of the success they have. But Strickland is very good defensively with that position now at this stage of his career.
Sean Strickland, after he won in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, not that long after, had a motorcycle accident and lost the top or part of his kneecap. And you'd think guys would just go at the knee, but nobody's able to have the success because once he starts rolling downhill with his boxing, that's when you beat him. Now, people discredited Jared Cannonier's the 49-46s that he had on 2 scorecards, and they looked at the Strickland split decision 49-46, and they went, hey, Strickland did pretty well against Cannonier. No, he didn't, because Cannonier was able to land the more powerful blows that landed against Strickland, and it didn't matter how advancing Strickland was. If you have kicks and you have boxing like Cannonier, you can beat a guy like Strickland, but Abus Magomedov doesn't strike like Jared Cannonier. Abus Magomedov doesn't strike like a Whittaker. He doesn't necessarily even strike like Hermanson, and that was a win for Strickland, and he sure as heck doesn't strike like Alex Pereira, because Magomedov doesn't stand and plant with his shots, but he also doesn't roll with head kicks at the same time. Now, I know he had that front kick against Dustin Stoichkos, but Magomedov is one of those guys that can mix a blend of traditional but unorthodox technique, and that's what's really gotten him to go. It's really been a cosmic gumbo for Abus Magomedov to get him to this point, and I know he had that shock left hook knockout against Lewis Taylor, the teammate of Bilal Muhammad, but out of these Magomedov wins, out of the losses, he's got that complete package. It's just not to the same kind of style as a Sean Strickland.
And I'll be curious to see how he does in a 5-round atmosphere against a Strickland, who, yes, he doesn't always win those 5-round fights, right? But his volume numbers are always at least above average. He's always doing something. And we've said this about Clay Guida for the longest time, right? Clay Guida, when he fights a prospect, what's the great thing that is going to be proven about that prospect? Whether or not they have good cardio. When you're fighting somebody like Sean Strickland, I do think cardio is that one thing that is going to be so important, but it's also how you're going to react to that pressure. We've seen some guys be able to hit him with their own power shots, Cannonier being one to where, hey, both guys are high volume fighters, but Cannonier is the X factor out of his power as well. I'm just really curious about this fight because Magomedov has struggled in the past with just pressure fighters who get his back up against the cage because he won't plan and kind of brawl a little bit on the inside. And in those brawling moments, yes, he could clip Strickland with a big shot, but Strickland's got a pretty good chin. Like, we've seen him get hit by big shots at middleweight, and without the big weight cut down to 170, I do think he is a very durable fighter at this weight class. I just think it's a fun fight because Strickland has all the tools he needs to win this fight, but he's going to have to follow a really important game plan to do. He's going to have to take this fight deeper into the waters because I do think the kicks of Magomedov, at least early, the power on them is going to give Strickland a little bit of issues.
And that's the thing for Sean Strickland. A lot of people have said, like, a death by 1,000 cuts type of fighter, and obviously, you know, the fact that Chris Curtis going to be in the corner. This one's a hometown fight for them out of Vegas.
Remember that Jack Marshman fight?
They live next door. They're buds. But yeah, the Jack Marshman fight. But for me, the Christoph Jocko fight where you're able to really cut him off, and even if you're following him at certain spots, Strickland was able to land the more damaging blows. Christoph Jocko over the PFL, yikes. Will Fleury, yikes. Those two guys fought each other. The Uriah Hall fight, Uriah couldn't get it going. The Brennan Allen fight, it was just an accumulation, and he really did a great job with that. And the Jack Hermanson thing, fight, the same thing. But if you look at it for Strickland, the thing that can get him in trouble is he fights to a game plan, and it can almost get him in the trouble. The Alex Pereira fight, why aren't you wrestling? Because he's not a wrestler. He's going to fight his game plan and stand in front of you, and he ate the power in that one. The Jared Cannonier fight, the same thing. The Zaleski fight, there was distance and separation for a spinning wheel kick.
So he's Joe Mazzulla. He can't make adjustments.
And the fight against Kamaru Usman, yeah, but no tears. And the fight against Kamaru Usman, it was the takedowns were the story. But
and that big overhand that dropped him.
Oh boy. But if you look at it for these two guys, I mean, great strikers, but they do it in different ways. So this is one of those interesting fights. You look at it, you consider it numbers on a page, and this is the time out where, what do? We throw it out to...
We do, the community section at YouTube.
And it's always out there, it's always before the fights, and the best part about doing it in the YouTube community tab is the fact that I've started to go and throw the pictures out there, and you get a ton of people that'll throw their thoughts out there. So 1,300 total votes in the last 12 hours on this one. 58% going with Sean Strickland. It was a really close 54% on our Instagram with Strickland. Out of the comments, Artem saying in over 2 years, Magomedov has only spent 19 seconds inside a cage. Hard to tell you how good he really is, which makes the fight so hard to predict. JJ saying never go against someone with the last name Medov. And the Sports Yellow saying so scared for my favorite podcaster, assuming that his favorite podcaster is Sean Strickland. So, Matt, the fans ever so slightly going with Sean Strickland. Abus Magomedov, the boogeyman of the weekend.
It's a hard fight to predict because, again, you go back to the middleweight division, right? If this was bantamweight, if this was featherweight, like, unranked fighters couldn't fight Arnold Allen, right? That's a difficult fight for most unranked fighters, but I do think Abus Magomedov has a great opportunity against Strickland.
Like, Ikram Aliskerov, in his third UFC fight, is going to fight Paulo Costa in a main event.
Exactly. Like, these are competitive fights, I think. Maybe that one might be tough, just because I do think we'll talk about that fight later anyways, but I do think this fight is going to be a very close one. No matter what you think of both fighters, I just think stylistically, it'll make for a very fun fight, because Sean Strickland is going to bring the fight out of Magomedov. He has those great kicks up the middle, but if Strickland eliminates those, I do think it is going to make him a much more limited fighter, and for that reason, I'm going to ever so slightly go with Sean Strickland. I do think the 5-round atmosphere is going to be a big key too. We bring up the fact that Magomedov, not only with the time off, his last fight wasn't very long either. Like, that's a really short time to go in there and have a 25-minute fight against a guy like Sean Strickland, who, has he won all of his main events? No, he hasn't, but he has been there and done that.
I mean, Sean Strickland off the couch on short notice, what was it?
Yeah, true. No training.
Yeah, he had 204 against 194 Nursulton Yamavov. He was able to push him back and negate some of those kicks out there. So I do like Strickland in the matchup, but again, the main events for Strickland so far, Hall, Hermanson, Cannonier, Yamavov. 3-1 in those spots, the loss to Cannonier. And if you do look at it for a guy like Sean Strickland, I mean, the damage can accumulate if the numbers can get up there. So a big-time fight in this one. Middleweight division is always in flux. Again, that Ali Skedov fight against Paulo Costa is coming up in the not-so-distant future. And then after this July 1st, this big-time Canada Day card, then it's UFC 290, and you've got Volkanovski taking on Yair Rodriguez.
What a fight that is.
You've got a women's strawweight title fight as well, so a lot of things on the line at UFC 290, and this is just the road to get us there. You know it, we're going to be live for Question Mark Kicks 2 hours before the prelims here on YouTube, and sometimes that plays out quite well, and it did for both of us, each of us, switching one pick apiece, and it both worked out. Now, you hate to do that to cheapen the start of the week, but the reason why we do the show is because we get a chance to look at the weigh-ins.
People miss weight, guys.
And look at how the week goes. So a big-time show over there. You guys have been pumping it. You guys have been tossing the likes. The subscriptions are on the way. So thank you so much for the engagement right there. And you're doing the darn thing listening to the audio podcast as well. So give yourselves a pat on the back. You are going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.